This is going to be a full review on a Giant Anthem 27.5. I have done a series of reviews on this. This one will be a comprehensive review, so I will discuss some things that I've discussed in the other ones, but I wanted to make this as a standalone full review. First off, I'll be reviewing this bike kind of more from the chassis standpoint of the Anthem 27.5 rather than each individual component, because I bought this as a frame only and hand selected every component that I wanted based on my years of riding and what I've come to really enjoy. So I'll talk about the components in terms of how they play into the overall ride, but not go too deep into them. First, I do want to applaud Giant for making this available as a frame only. You can buy the aluminum frame and the carbon frame as a frame only. And there are other companies that do not offer frame sets, which I think is a disservice to us, because a lot of us like to build up our own bikes. So really appreciate them doing that and making a reasonable aluminum frame. This one, aluminum one, is about $1,650 around there. Some companies, one of the big three that I won't name on video, this year offers a frame set, but it's $6,000 because you have to buy a carbon and you have to buy the fork with it. Even with the frame and fork, I think that's just ridiculous. So really appreciate Giant's decision to offer this, and I hope they keep doing that, and I'll leave it at that. Now, when you buy this as a frame only, you do get a kit to convert it to a 142. It comes with a 135 axle, rear axle, and you don't get the axle. And if you've watched my other videos, that's my main complaint on this, is that they don't include this axle. It's a special order item from Giant. It's made by DT Swiss, but it's every time I've ordered two of them now, and they've been back ordered every time, and I had to wait about 5 or 6 months for this one to come in. They do include these rear dropout, I guess you would just call it a kit for the axle, so you can do a 142. So it comes with that. You just don't have the axle when you buy the frame. Now, if you buy the carbon frame, you do get a 142 axle. This frame set does come with a Fox shock, and honestly, that's one of the reasons I went with the aluminum. You know, I love Fox shocks, and I know how to work on them very well, and I'm just accustomed to them. I've had the best success as far as maintenance with Fox suspension. I have owned 4 different Giant Anthems. I owned the original 26, which was 80 millimeters of travel, the Anthem X26, which was 4 inches of travel, the Anthem X29, and the Anthem 27.5. And to me, this is the best one that Giant has made as far as handling. I did like the 29. The chain stays were a little bit long for the tight trails that I typically ride, but that's a really smooth bike, and I actually got back on one this past week, and it really reminded me of how much I enjoyed it, except for the chain stays. They weren't quite as bad as I remembered, and it's a really good handling bike. But this 27.5 to me handles the best out of all of them. It's a really balanced bike. Giant did a great job on the geometry. This bike has 17-inch chain stays. The Anthem X29 had 18.2-inch chain stays. The wheelbase on this is a medium, is a 43.3, which is just 0.2 inches shorter than the Anthem X29. And what that means is, since the chain stays are so much shorter, but the wheelbase is not, it's got a longer front center, which is going to be the distance between the bottom bracket and the front axle. The longer the front center, the better handling the bike. It's more stable, and there's a lot of numbers that come into play, particularly the head angle, to make a front center like that. And this head angle is a 69.5 degree head angle with a 100 millimeter travel fork, which is what I have on it. And so that makes for a really sharp handling bike without being twitchy. Again, it's really balanced, and I'm glad Giant didn't put an ultra steep head angle. That would have, to me, really messed up the handling. My Anthem X, the original, I'm sorry, not the Anthem X, the original Anthem that had 80 millimeters of travel, had a 72-degree head angle. That thing was so twitchy. That was just a pure race bike. This geometry is really fast. I mean, this can be a race bike, but it can also be a trail bike, excuse me, trail bike, because of the fact that the geometry is slack enough to make the bike stable and not too twitchy for the average rider. One thing that I really like about this bike, especially coming from one who has built up a lot of bikes over the years, is the cable routing. It uses these plugs, and I built this up as a 1x10. And I've got a whole video on how I did that if you're interested. That I really like running just a single front chain ring. And by the way, while I'm talking about that, this race face narrow wide is great. I've owned this bike now for 9.5 months and have never dropped a chain. I don't have a chain guide. It just uses the narrow wide chain ring, which just keeps the chain glued, and never dropped a chain. So that's really good. So back to the cable routing, it uses the plugs, and you can see on this side I've got the rear derailleur and the rear brake going into the bike frame, and then it comes out down here. And it's nice that they don't use little guides that you have to feed the cables through. It's really easy to get the cables in there, and they don't bounce around. These rubber plugs really hold it well. I rode another bike recently that had internal cable routing, but the cables just dinged around inside the frame. It also goes, I ran the rear derailleur through the chainstay and out the back, and it's really a smart move. You can run the rear brake on the bosses here, or you can run it inside. I chose to go inside so that it's just a cleaner look. But really good job that Giant did, the way they did the cable routing. The older Anthems and Trances actually had the cables come across the shock, which rubbed the shock and sometimes touched your legs, and I did not like that. And this is really clean, keeps it down low, no contact with your legs, quiet riding, cable routing. So again, great job to that. Of course, the Anthem uses Giant's Maestro suspension, which has become one of my favorite suspension designs. With the Anthem X29, I think the chainstays were so long on that bike because of the Maestro. It seems to me that with certain types of virtual pivot suspensions that you cannot get the chainstays really short, but on the 27.5 it doesn't matter. 17-inch chainstays are really perfect, and the Maestro suspension works great. If you're not real familiar with Maestro, when you torque hard on the pedals, it stiffens up the suspension, so you get a really firm pedaling platform. As soon as you stop pedaling, you've got all the suspension you need. So really, you have suspension when you need it, and it firms up when you need it to firm up. And it's also the braking forces are separate. So if you're not too familiar with what's called brake jacking, some suspension designs, when you apply the rear brake, it firms up the suspension, and usually when you're going downhill is when you need your suspension. The Maestro will decouple the braking forces from the suspension, and so that's another plus for the Maestro. As far as maintenance on this bike has been, I'm going to say 100% maintenance free for the last 9.5 months. I've done long events, I've done races, I've done short rides, long rides, hard rides, easy rides, and this bike has held up beautifully. And I've owned several Giants over the years, and they have been one of the most maintenance-free bikes that I've ever owned. I've never had a problem with the pivot or anything like that, any kind of bearing issue. They just work great. I do like how easy it is to get the rear shock off the bike. That may or may not matter to you, but I do my own suspension maintenance, and I can get this shock off this bike really quickly. So it's easy to work on, no proprietary components, which is a plus for me. Again, even if you buy the whole bike, Giant does a pretty good job of just using, like standard Shimano components. They don't do really any kind of custom components that makes it an issue when it's time to replace or repair something. This is a 100 millimeter travel rear suspension design, which is made for cross country. It's also good for fast trail riding. So if you wanted something that's more designed for rough, burly trails. You probably want to step up to the Trance, which I also own, and I have a review on that if you're interested in watching that. But the Anthem is just a really nice cross-country platform, probably one of the best for the average rider who's not going to tackle really rough terrain. And like I said earlier, I did put a 100mm travel fork. You can also go up to 120 on this, and for 2015, Giant is offering the SX model, which has a 120mm travel fork, which is going to slacken the head angle even more. It's going to slow down the response and steering of the bike, but it's also going to make it more capable on the descents and make it a little bit more stable. Not that this bike is twitchy by any means, but for someone who is doing rough downhills, that's a nice option if you don't want to go all the way up to the Trance. My Trance weighs a little under 30 pounds. This bike, built up with the 1x10, comes in just a little over 24, and 6 pounds makes a big difference in the way a bike feels. So if you wanted a bike that's more capable and rough and not as heavy, that 120mm travel fork is a great option for you. And I'll just make a quick comment about the Stan's wheels. I love Stan's wheels. They're the only wheel set I use on a mountain bike now. And I did put the podiums on, which is they're quite a bit more expensive than the other aluminum wheels. The other ones I considered were the Crest, but the podiums are really light and make this fast bike even faster. I'm pretty light, 145 pounds, so I don't need a really burly wheel set for my everyday riding, so I could get away with the Stan's podiums, but that probably takes off almost a pound of rotational weight. So just wanted to throw that in there. And again, this is a medium. I think I mentioned that before. I am 5 feet 8.5 inches tall, and this bike fits me like a glove. And Giant holds pretty true to their sizings. Some other bike manufacturers, I've actually ridden smalls, but the medium fits me really well. So if you're in maybe the 5'5" to 5'9" or 5'10" range, a medium would be your size. And then, of course, if you're above that, a large, or below that, a small. So that's going to wrap up this comprehensive review of the Giant Anthem 27.5. It's a bike that's made for cross-country, and if you're riding cross-country or fast trail, it's one that I think will suit you very well. And again, this is the aluminum model. I've owned several carbon bikes in the past. I heard recently that Giant is the only company that manufactures its own aluminum bikes. Whether or not that's true, I haven't really verified it, but they make an awesome aluminum bike. I really don't have a lot of regrets of not going with the carbon, which was about $1,000 more. You do get a little bit more weight savings, a little bit stiffer frame. The carbon one, by the way, while mentioning it, is a carbon front triangle, but the chain stays and seat stays, so the rear part of the bike is still aluminum. So I love the way this bike rides. Like I said, I've owned many carbon bikes in the past, and I don't really regret going with the aluminum, especially for the Fox shock, like I said, and also the price savings. So this is by far the best Anthem that Giant has put out, and it's probably one of the best cross-country bikes that I've ever owned, and I've owned quite a few in the past. This bike is a blast to ride. It handles very well, and I had mentioned the geometry before, and let me just talk about real quick before I totally wrap this up. The cornering and handling of this bike is awesome. I just made a video where I compare 29 and 27.5, so I'm not really going to go into the difference there. You can go back and watch that if you want. It got kind of long, but the one thing that I absolutely love about this bike is the handling. You can flow in and out of the corners extremely well. It holds a line well. 27.5 will dive into a corner really well, and you can sprint out, and get up to speed really quick. So again, the handling of this bike is just phenomenal. So that will wrap it up for this review. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. Thanks for watching.